God refuses to be used. The glory of the Lord departs. The tabernacle is taken. God disrupts the enemies of Israel on his own. The tabernacle returns on its own. And Jesus continues to teach on what it means to abide in him. Today on 3-in-1, as we consider 1 Samuel chapters 4 through 6 and John chapter 15. The Philistines. Who were the Philistines, and why were they at war with the people of Israel? Well, before we answer that question, let's also acknowledge that we are still in the time of the judges, when over and over and over again, the nation of Israel would forget about God, forsake God, fall into bondage, cry out to God. God would graciously raise up a judge to deliver. Israel would be delivered, but then the process would repeat itself. We are still in the time when men did what was right in their own eyes, refusing to honor God as king, only seeking him, or rather using him, when because of their own sinful choices, they were taken into captivity and broken in bondage. Israel had pushed back against most of the nations within the land of Canaan, but the Philistines were imports from the island of Crete. Equipped with Grecian military-grade weaponry, the Philistines were a formidable enemy. So Israel decided in desperation to bring out their greatest weapon, the Ark of the Covenant. Or at least they thought it would be their greatest weapon. What represented the throne of God in the Holy of Holies, only seen once a year and only by the high priest, they thought surely God would have to fight for them if they had the ark out in front. But God will not be used. If they truly wanted his help, they should have humbled themselves and just asked. But instead, Hophni and Phinehas brazenly brought the ark out in the open, and it backfired bad. Israel was defeated, the glory of the Lord departed, the ark was stolen. Now, the ark was not lost. God knew exactly where it was, and we'll get to that in just a second. But after the battle, when reports came back to Eli and the wife of Phinehas, did you notice that both were grieved more by the ark of the Lord being captured than the deaths of Hophni and Phinehas? Eli fell off his chair, broke his neck. Phinehas' wife died in childbirth, but before she died, she named her child Ichabod, which means the glory of God is gone. Man, poor kid. But this happened more than we realize in Israel, naming children based off the circumstances surrounding their birth. Remember Sick and Tired from the book of Ruth? Mahlon and Chilion, born during a time of famine, died during a time of famine. But Ichabod, naming your kid Ichabod, that's intense. The glory of God is gone. Now, not only is the ark of God gone, but more importantly, the Spirit of God is gone. Israel was in an extremely dangerous place, especially with the advancing enemy known as the Philistines. Now, in chapter 5, we read how God is able to take care of himself all on his own. Unlike the other nations and the way that they would worship their false gods, the ark was not God, but it was God's, and he would not have it in the hands of the enemy for long. For the enemies of Israel wanted to use the ark as a weapon as well, but God was not going to allow that to happen. So, through a very unique, intense, creative, and humorous sequence of events, God convinced even the mighty Philistines to just give the ark back. And if you did not read today, you are really missing out. Now, when the ark returned, the people assumed that since it did not work as a weapon, that it was somehow just an ordinary box. But the people of Beth Shemesh were reminded vividly that the ark was still holy when 50,070 fell for just looking inside. See, the Ark of the Covenant was still holy. It was still set apart for a very specific use. And that use was not as a weapon. God will not bow to manipulation or ultimatums. He does not dance or answer us like a cosmic butler. If we want his help, then we need to approach him in the way that he prescribes. Boldly, yes, but humbly as well. Well, as we transition to our New Testament reading in John chapter 15, we join Jesus in the midst of preparing his apostles for his soon death and departure. Departure to the Father's house to prepare a place for them. But as we read today, he's not going to leave them as orphans. He's going to send them the Helper to help them, the Holy Spirit. I love that's the name that Jesus gives to the Holy Spirit, the Helper. He is here to help us to walk with Jesus, and especially to abide in Jesus. For that is the most important part, and that's where Jesus begins in chapter 15, as he continues to prepare the apostles, saying, "Abide in me, and I in you. As the branch cannot bear fruit of itself unless it abides in the vine, neither can you unless you abide in me. I am the vine, you are the branches. He who abides in me and I in him bears much fruit. For without me, you can do nothing." Now, what does it mean to abide? Well, when we follow the visual that Jesus gives us with the vine, it means to be constantly connected to the source of life, to the source of stability, to the source of nourishment. Constantly connected to God, in fellowship with God, in relationship with God, talking with God, walking with God, pouring out your heart to God as you would with a trusted friend, listening to God as you would with a loving father, obeying God as you would with a benevolent king, humbly receiving from God all that he has for you as the ultimate gift giver. For without him, we can do nothing. But we can do all things through him who gives us strength. So we choose to remain in the love of God as we patiently, passionately, obediently, and actively wait for his soon promised return. And who is there to help us along the way? The Helper, the Holy Spirit. Now, who is the Holy Spirit? Well, based off of some circles, you would think that we could use the Holy Spirit like Israel tried to use the ark in our reading today, like a magic amulet of sorts to ward off our evil enemies. But God will not be used in that way, for the Holy Spirit is not a weapon. He is a person. He is God, and he can be grieved. Ephesians 4:30 says, "And do not grieve the Holy Spirit of God, by whom you were sealed for the day of redemption." See, you cannot grieve a weapon. You cannot grieve the force. You can, however, grieve a person. I can, however, grieve God, who wants desperately to help me, but only on his terms, because his terms are the absolute best for my benefit and for his glory. So we submit to the Holy Spirit and say regularly, "Nevertheless, not my will, but yours be done." And his will is that we would abide in the vine, that we would be constantly, vitally, relationally connected to Jesus, who said, "As the Father loved me, I also loved you. Abide in my love. If you keep my commandments, you will abide in my love, just as I have kept my Father's commandments and abide in his love. These things I have spoken to you, that my joy may remain in you, and that your joy may be full. This is my commandment, that you love one another as I have loved you. Greater love has no one than this, than to lay down one's life for his friends. You are my friends, if you do whatever I command you. No longer do I call you servants, for a servant does not know what his master is doing, but I have called you friends. For all things that I heard from my Father I have made known to you. You did not choose me, but I chose you, and appointed you that you should go and bear fruit, and that your fruit should remain, that whatever you ask the Father in my name, he may give you. These things I command you, that you love one another."